Welcome to Module 3 of Week 1, Fiduciary Relationships. And I'm showing you your guardian angel, and that guardian angel is like the fiduciary. They're taking care of you. So let's see what a fiduciary actually does. First of all, be aware that CFP practitioners are fiduciaries. The board has established a fiduciary standard for practitioners that you should all be familiar with. You should have covered it in your 501 course. You should definitely also prepare for taking the CFP exam because it plays a major role in today's exam. Congress requires registered investment advisors to also be fiduciaries, and CPAs are financial advisors who are also going to be fiduciaries. And other financial planners and advisors are probably not fiduciaries. And so you should be very careful on who you recommend as a fiduciary. You should also be very careful when you're fulfilling a fiduciary duty. For example, if you're giving financial advice under the CFP license you have, that would be a fiduciary. But if you're selling stock at the same time for Merrill Lynch, you will not be doing it. So you have to make sure your client understands what role you're playing so that you don't get confused as to whether or not you're a fiduciary. Legal definition of fiduciary, if we go to Black's Law Dictionary, there's several definitions. The one I like best is fiduciary must put the client's interest first. I think if you think in terms of if you can benefit or your client can benefit, which one should benefit, that's got to be your client. I think the most typical example of that is in case of you getting commissions. If you have a product that's pretty good and you get a 6% commission, but there's a much better product that gets 3% commission, you need to think about that client interest first. And that tells you what commission you're going to get. Fiduciary relationship, no matter how you look at it, be it the CFP definition, which is a little bit lighter than the ones used by lawyers and CPAs and registered investment advisors, they all require good faith. Good faith being honest and trying to do a good job. They require loyalty to the individual you're working with. They require reasonable care. Reasonable care to me is primarily that you've done your due diligence. You've researched to the point that you feel comfortable, that you understand the issue, and that you have the answer for the issue. That might mean going to other people to get the information, or maybe something you can research. But being due diligent is very important. Typical fiduciary responsibilities. First of all, we act for the benefit of clients within the scope of the agreement. That sounds easy, but we have to make sure that the agreement we have with the client is very clear as to exactly what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. I realize many times when you're in the selling mode, you try to overstate it, or puff it is another term for it, what you're going to do. That can work against you. Likewise, if you're being so specific, so detailed, that might turn the client off. So it's a matter of being in the middle of that. And I wish there was an easy answer, but there isn't. Full disclosure of all facts. Again, this is a major thing for CFPs. Are they worried that you're getting a commission? Are they aware that you are working for a company who may not be interested in the benefit necessarily of putting the client before the company? Loyalty and not self-dealing is important. Loyalty to the client rather than what might be better for you, getting back to the commissions we talked about. Impartial dealings, that you're not going to put the company before the client. Are you going to put your own interest before the client? Impartial. Due diligence, that you've done your homework, that you're prepared to give the information, that you're qualified to give the information. And finally, competent service. In other words, getting back, do you have the licenses that you need? Do you have the registrations that are required? These are all parts of being a fiduciary. And a good way of putting it is you don't give hip shooting answers to a client if you're a fiduciary. if you're a fiduciary, you have the responsibility of doing your research before giving advice to the client. I would also suggest all advice to clients be in writing, so it's very clear what that advice is. Too many times we get involved in situations where we are trying to do the right thing for the client, and we're giving them verbal advice, and they misunderstand it, because each of us hears differently what we're hearing based on our own experience and our own knowledge level. So every one of you listening to this right now is getting something a little bit different from me. That's normal. So that's where the big advantage of putting in writing is. Clarifies. And if the client doesn't understand the writing, then I guess you rewrite it. Ethics for standard for the financial planner. I guess this could be called under the legal side or the fiduciary side. It doesn't matter because it both applies. We have those standards set by the employer. What does the employer have as far as the standards listed for you? And all employers in the area of financial area have a statement of objectives, a statement of goals, and maybe even job description for you. Those are the standards set by your employer. You have licenses. For example, if you have a Series 7 license or a Series 6 license, a real estate license, an insurance license, these licenses have certain requirements for you to abide by. And we have certifications such as the CFP board or certifications from other organizations. And finally, the organizations we belong to. A lot of you belong to Financial Planning Board, Financial Planning Association. Others of you belong to insurance organizations or HFCs, etc. These organizations have rules. And so you have to abide by all of these, depending on what you're doing. And certainly if you're employed by employer full-time, makes it very straightforward. You got all four you have to deal with. And then the question is, how do you comply with all four? And you have to, in your own mind, and what I have done in my practices is I've always written down exactly what the ethics standards are required by my employer, the very licenses. So when I do income tax, I have a different requirement than if I'm doing financial planning. And when I sold real estate, I had a different license and different requirements. Each one meant I had a different role to play. And I had a written description of each that told me exactly what I was expected to do for my clients in each of those cases. I think that would be a good idea for you to start, especially if you're currently in the field. What are the requirements set forth by your employer and any licenses you have and any organizations you have? And if you belong to some others, have some other certifications, what do they require? In fact, one of the frustrations I get is when I hear students say, well, I don't know what's required by the board, or I don't know what's required by my CHFC, or by my status as an enrolled agent or a Series 7. Well, you better find out, because that's part of being a financial planner, part of being the legal and fiduciary requirements as a CFP. With that, we're going to end the session, and we'll get to the week 4 module at your convenience.